Today we're going to talk a little bit about navigating healthy relationships, setting boundaries, etc. And I'm going to meet you where you are and help you to get the resources that you need. And so we're going to start off just by saying thank you to MS Views and News, because without them we would not have this MS Mental Wellness Chat, and we have been going strong for, goodness gracious, like I think 3 years at least. So I am so thankful for them, and I'm thankful for Viatris for their support as well. Without it, we wouldn't have the sponsorship that we need to do this program. So I am incredibly grateful for MS Visa News and for Viatris for their sponsorship. So we're going to talk about a couple of things tonight, but before we get and dive into the topics, I really just want to talk about the elephant in the room for just a hot second. So there's a lot going on in the world, and we're not going to pick at it, we're not going to talk about it, but we're just giving it space. We're going to let it be here. And so I want you to know that it's okay if, if over the past couple weeks, if you've had some variability in your mood, some changes, maybe feeling a little bit more down or frustrated, etc. There's a lot going on in the world, and I just want to give it space. And as we talk about boundaries, I'm going to talk a little bit about setting boundaries with people, but I'm also going to talk, and I hope that we can talk a little bit about like setting boundaries with things like the news and things like that, like how can we take care of ourselves during times, when there's a lot of challenges and a lot of things going on in the world. So I just wanted to give it space. So we're going to talk tonight about a couple of things. We're going to talk about relationships and healthy relationships, why they're important. Why are they important for MS? They're important for everybody, but they do support us, in terms of living with MS. It's good to have healthy relationships. We're going to talk about boundaries a little bit, because I think with life, boundaries get challenged naturally with work, with friends, with people, with our community, etc. And then we're going to talk a little bit about communication. I talked last month a good bit about communication, so I'm going to glaze a little bit over some of that. And then we're going to talk about self-care. So healthy relationships and MS. Why is this important? Well, with a disease like MS, chronic diseases, they're emotionally challenging sometimes. And so having a strong support system can be very important for you, and having healthy relationships as you're navigating the challenges of living with MS. And if you are a care partner or someone who loves somebody with MS, it's equally as important for you in that role as well to have healthy relationships and to have support, because chronic diseases can be very challenging. And healthy relationships are positive for us, so they can provide emotional, a place to deal with emotional support, reduce stress, improve our mental well-being, and can turn it really a positive impact. I think I've seen many couples have been able to improve aspects of their relationship. Also, healthy relationships give us the opportunity for stress reduction. Stress is known to exacerbate MS and other chronic diseases. So, and I know that many of you guys know this. We talk about stress often in this mental wellness chat. Also, healthy relationships, your friends, your family, your support often play a role in helping you to make healthy choices. So they are not in control of what you're doing, but they help to encourage that, and that support is helpful. Healthy relationships can actually help to attribute like healthy lifestyle choices. A supportive social network can encourage healthy lifestyle choices such as regular exercise or diet, etc. Sometimes relationships can counteract that as well, but we're going to focus on healthy relationships and how they're good. And then healthcare advocacy. So many of you may have experienced in your journey that you have had to advocate for yourself within the healthcare system, and often having healthy relationships and people that care and love you, that they're kind of on your team and that you're not alone while you're doing that. Healthy relationships can serve as a motivation, and it helps to reduce isolation. Often with chronic disease, people can, feel very isolated, and healthy relationships help to provide a sense of companionship, and this helps you to feel connected, etc. Now, so really, in summary, healthy relationships are really critical for the emotional support, for the stress reduction, for the better disease management, etc. As you're living with MS or a chronic disease. Now, I have had people on here before that didn't feel like they had a lot of healthy relationships, or they struggled with support partners, etc. And so if you're one of those people and you're on here, I want you to feel free in the question box to, to express kind of some of your concerns or areas that you want to grow. That's okay. You can be free. So, introduction to healthy relationships. So let's, what is a healthy relationship? We've got to define this a little bit more. We're going to talk a little bit about the impact of healthy relationships, and we just mentioned a little bit in relationship to MS specifically. But then we're going to talk a little bit about types of relationships, because there's all different types of relationships that we have in our world. So, so defining a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship should have trust and honesty. These are fundamental cornerstones. Both parties need to be able to trust each other, and trust is built something that's built over time, and it can also be easily broken. So it's crucial to maintain honesty and dealing with your feelings. So communication. Healthy relationships have really good communication, but really good communication doesn't mean that you're not talking about difficult things. You're just open, you're respectful, you have effective communication that allows both people to express their feelings without, and their desires, without concerns or fear of judgment or retaliation, etc. Then healthy relationships have mutual respect. This means that they value and understand each other's values and boundaries. And it implies that neither person belittles the other person of their self-worth. And then healthy relationships have boundaries. And every individual has their limits of what they find acceptable and comfortable. And we're going to talk about boundaries a little bit more. But a healthy relationship respects these boundaries. And then healthy relationships have equality. I like to call this also reciprocity. So where there's give and take. So in relationships that, neither one tries to dominate the other, but there's give and take, and there's sort of a flow in the relationship. And then also healthy relationships have independence. Now, while our relationship is about coming together, it's important to know that it's important for us to have a sense of independence as well. And so we talked a little bit about the positive impacts of a healthy relationship, but I'll just go over a couple of the points. So your mental health can be better. If you have healthy relationships, your physical health is better, because often if your relationships are unhealthy, then that's going to create stress, and that's going to create, we know with MS, that stress is not good for your disease. Healthy relationships create a sense of longevity. People in strong supportive relationships often live longer. The emotional, psychological, and physical support can lead to a longer and healthier life, and that's with disease and without disease. Emotional growth. People that are in healthy relationships have a capacity for more emotional growth, because they're allowing themselves to have those discussions, to take and give, to have independence, etc. So they tend to be able to learn and communicate and to advance in their emotional growth. And then just have a sense of purpose and belonging. Having close ties and connections to individuals gives you a sense of belonging and purpose, and that can make you feel valued and understood. So there's different types of relationships. There's friendships. There is family. If you can go back one slide, please. There's friendships, there's family, there are romantic relationships, there's professional relationships, there's casual acquaintances, etc. And so we'll move now to the next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about effective communication, but remember I said that we're not going to stay here very, very long. And actually, before we go here, I'm going to use the question box just for a second. So for those of you that feel comfortable, what in a relationship that you have that is a healthy relationship, what is your favorite part of that? So I will go first. So I have, in my past, I've had unhealthy relationships and friendships I've had to navigate. But in some of the healthy relationships I have, I really value the ability to that I can find that balance of independence and also at the same time find that balance of being able to ask for help. So I find that that has been a positive thing for me. Let's see. Sometimes when I come off the cuff with these questions are a little bit harder, but we do have more. Um, Carolyn says being open and honest. Rhonda says thank you for reinforcing communication skills. Joe says it's being codependent, being in a codependent relationship bad. A codependent relationship is bad, and I won't talk about it to too much detail, but there is a really great book. So codependency is it can be a relationship pattern that can create some unhealthy boundaries. And but there is a book that is called Codependent No More, and they have a really great workbook and a book. And so if anyone is dealing with codependency in relationships and you know, and struggle with independence and autonomy and struggle with the idea of being responsible for someone else's feelings, emotions, etc., the Codependent No More is a great book. Kathy says unconditional love. Maddie says feeling like I belong here. Carolyn says how can people with MS become more positive? Attitude and outlook is everything. Carol says honesty and sharing. Jane, I believe it's Warren and Jane, but I believe it's just Jane. So Jane says looking out for another's best interest. That is a great value. Joe says having nothing to hold back. Maureen says feeling safe. Carolyn says asking for help is hard, but it helps in the long run. Absolutely. And Kathy said a safe place to fall, feel support, and to be my authentic self. Very good. Thank you, guys. So we're going to talk a little bit about effective communication. And but again, I talked a lot about communication last time in the last mental wellness chat. So I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to go through it a little bit faster. And Linda says being authentic and supportive. And Rhonda says my best friend and I can count on bringing fun and joy into my life. I love that. We all need fun and joy. And that's an incredible thing to have. So I love that. And Jane said, I'm correct. It's just Jane. So Jane, I'm glad you're here. So for the effective communication, so a couple of cornerstones of effective communication is active listening. And active listening is when you're listening to listen and not to respond. And one way to actively listen is when you can understand what the person is saying enough to be able to repeat it back to them, not verbatim. But if so when I told you earlier today that I took a nap and I up until 6 o'clock and I felt rested and I felt better, that if you were actively listening, you could have said, so it sounds like you're feeling good. And I would have said, yes. And you would, that's an example of active listening. But the importance of active listening is that it builds trust and understanding. And when you're allowing yourself to actively listen, the person speaking to you really feels like that you're paying attention and that you care. And it also can prevent misunderstandings because a lot of challenges in relationships happen within communication. Actually, a lot of challenges in life happen from miscommunications in general. And so active listening can enhance your relationships. When people feel understood and you feel like you understand someone, then that can lead to more deeper, more meaningful connections. Problem solving and decision making. By understanding all of the details when you're actively listening, this can help you make better decisions. And then yeah, really with active listening, this allows you to gain insight and learn new concepts and expand your ability to listen. Listening is not always easy. I'm a therapist by background, and I love people and I love listening, but listening is not always easy. And so you can really, if you allow yourself to really be able to understand what someone's saying, and I challenge you to practice active listening tonight. Ask someone if you are, you can even do it via text, but I would rather you do it verbally if you could. Ask someone how they're doing, or ask how their day was, or ask them a simple question and then just kind of repeat back what they said, not verbatim, but kind of in a way that you understood it. And see, you might see that they look up and say, yeah, you understand. So the other effective communication skill is just kind of knowing nonverbal communication cues. And so we say a lot without saying words. So what are facial expressions? Paying attention to those, paying attention to body posture, gestures, eye contact, proximity and personal space, and tone of voice. But we also live in a very digital world. And so I think it's important because I do find that I find myself included communicating a lot more via telephone, texting, chatting that way, et cetera. Making sure that you, because there can be a lot of missed communication in that type of communication. And so I remember one of the funniest things I've shared is that a thumbs up, some people use a thumbs up to say, kind of saying like, I hear you, I understand. Sometimes when I see a thumbs up, I think it means like that it feels sarcastically received. I don't know. I don't like the thumbs up quite as much. And so anyways, I've had to be able to communicate. Oh, if I use a thumbs up, I'm not doing it like that. I don't really enjoy that emoji because it doesn't capture what I'm thinking. And so I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to read a little bit. So Linda says, it's hard for me to not interject when they are talking because I want to make sure I understand what they said. I need to stop asking questions while they talk. So what a tip or a strategy, one is, yes, to learn to kind of like hold questions. A little tip that you might be able to do, and I used to do this when I was doing therapy, is I had a little pen and paper around, and I would just write one word that would trigger the question that I wanted to ask, and I would just write it there so I could focus and continue to pay attention. The other thing you could say is, do you mind if we stop for just 1 second? And I just want to clarify that I've understood what you've said so far. And then from there, don't build on that. Then let them say, okay, so I'm going to let you, please continue. And Carol said, is that like motivational interviewing? There is some themes of that. Absolutely. There can be definitely some themes of that. So, with effective communication, we also have the ability to give feedback and to say what we need. And this is hard. You remember all the relationships I talked about? So this is not just your loved one at home. This is, people maybe at work or people in your community, et cetera. Healthy relationships are, to be able to give feedback and then also say what you need, to be able to be assertive. And being assertive is not a bad thing. It is, it's saying a truthful thing. It's having a boundary. And it's being honest. And so healthy relationships and effective communication should have the ability to have that, even if it can feel kind of uncomfortable. In a healthy relationship, you should be able to come back to it, even if it feels uncomfortable later. And so I would like for you to share a communication strategy that helps you when others don't understand your MS or don't understand something that you're saying. I will say that sometimes when I am tired or overtired, sometimes I feel like I don't articulate quite as well as I want to, and that's because of my MS, because I think it makes my processing a little bit slower, and so I can find it frustrating. It feels frustrating when I feel like I'm not explaining something and someone's not understanding it quite to the same way. So one of the strategies that I've helped is to call it out, to say, I am sorry, I'm a little bit fatigued and I feel like I'm not articulating this the right way. Most people want to hang with me and they want to find out what I'm going to say anyways. For me, one of the strategies is just being honest about it instead of feeling frustrating or frustrated about it. And that's really important too, is that, sometimes we have to say, it's not today. Sometimes other strategies might be to come back and if we realize that we need to communicate more about something, letter writing can help. I think good face-to-face is always helpful, but sometimes letters can be helpful because letters give us time to get our thoughts together, as well as gives time for the recipient to really read and process. So sometimes I think that can be a strategy as well. So we're going to move on to our next. Carolyn, thank you for joining us. So we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries in relationships. Boundaries are so important. I've been talking about them for a long time on this mental wellness chat. And so we're going to talk a little bit about setting personal boundaries, respecting the boundaries of others, and understanding the difference between unhealthy and healthy boundaries, because that does exist. So in essence, boundaries are essential really for us and for all of human interaction. They facilitate respectful, healthy, and nurturing relationships. They allow us to interact without feeling compromised. And recognizing and understanding the distinctions can lead to more fulfilling relationships and a deeper sense of integrity. So understanding your boundaries for yourself is really healthy for you. Understanding the boundaries of the people that you interact with too is really important as well. And being able to articulate what you need in terms of boundaries is important. So setting personal boundaries. So personal boundaries are our guidelines, or limits that tell us what we're comfortable with and how others can behave around us. So they relate to physical, emotional, and mental aspects of our lives. So it's important to know that boundaries help to protect our self-esteem and autonomy, and they can really be helpful to maintaining mental and emotional well-being. So right here, I'm going to talk a little bit about boundaries with things like the news. And I talked about this a little bit during COVID several years ago. But negotiating boundaries about how much information you take in is important too. I am not giving any advice on how much to take in, how much to step back, etc. But kind of knowing what it is that you need and what helps you when things around you feel chaotic, because sometimes it's important to create a sense of stillness. And so ways to set boundaries. Well, one of the ways is to have an idea like what it is that you need. Recognize being self-aware and understand your feelings and your needs. This really is going to require for you to kind of look into yourself and think about what is it that I need in terms of boundaries, what makes me comfortable and what makes me uncomfortable. For example, I'm not going to talk about the news, but in terms of boundaries, something that makes me comfortable is getting to know people, but something that makes me uncomfortable is when people are too much in my space, too quick, too fast. But I love to get to know people. And boundaries for me are important. If you say something, that you keep your word. And I know with MS, fatigue and stuff challenges that. So that's a little bit different. But kind of knowing what feels good for you. Also, ways to set boundaries is with clear communication. Expressing your boundaries directly, letting people know what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, or what you can do and what you can't do. Often what I see when people that are living with MS or other chronic conditions is that for people that are not working, that often the people in their lives will ask them to do these extra things, to volunteer, and those things are healthy, but I've had family members of people try to lean on for childcare and other things, and those were crossing over boundaries that really were actually unhealthy for the person, and so it was hard. So boundary setting is something that we actually have to do often. So we have Carol that says asking the person to slow down and break down into smaller conversations. So with communication, and that's a really good suggestion, Carol. Asking a person to slow down and to break things down into smaller conversations, and that can help you have more effective communication. With boundaries, having consistency, ensuring that your boundaries are consistently monitored. If I tell my son that he can only have one soda a week, and every day he asks me for a soda, and I give him one 3 days out of the times he asks, then I'm being inconsistent. And so then it makes sense that he's going to always be asking for a soda, etc. Changing boundaries at the last minute can really lead to misinterpretations. And then seeking support. Sharing with or seeking therapy or help. I know as the counselor, I helped many people set boundaries because it's often that's something that we have to figure out in relationships, and sometimes we naturally do it, and sometimes we can realize, you know what, I really have not done a really good job with that boundary setting. And so so it's important to know that you can get outside help to get help with boundaries as well. And then, not only should we have people respect our boundaries, but we should be respecting the boundaries of other people. And so having empathy and understanding, recognizing that just because you have boundaries, it doesn't mean that other people don't. Having open dialogue about someone's need for space or what boundaries they have. And I think that just helps you understand them more. Avoiding pressuring. You don't want people to pressure you on your boundaries, so avoiding the pressuring for them, I think, is fair. And that acceptance of that everyone has a different history, comfort level, threshold, and so accepting that without judgment, because we want them to accept our boundaries without judgment. And then there's healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries. So healthy boundaries are set up based on self-awareness and based on an understanding of what your needs are. They promote and respect and respect and understanding. They're flexible and can be adjusted as one grows or circumstances change, but they're also pretty constant. And then they foster independence and personal growth. Whereas unhealthy boundaries are rigid and they change, at any time. They can be too loose or undefined, making it confusing. This can lead to or stem from fear or past traumas or even insecurities or worries that if you don't set a boundary that you'll lose a person or you'll lose a friendship, that you'll lose the ability to help out at your church or etc. Healthy boundaries can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed, exploited, and disrespected. So often what I would see as a therapist is that when somebody felt like their boundaries were being not respected, they felt resentful. And that was one of the ways to realize and that we could identify, you know what, I think that you're feeling like your boundaries are crossed. And this also, not having good boundaries promotes codependency, where one person is feeling overly tied to the other person's behaviors or feelings. So setting boundaries really gives you the opportunity to establish clear guidelines and limits for yourself, and communicating them effectively is really important for others. Okay, so what is a boundary you have set in the past? Was it hard to do, and did it help? So as you're writing, if you're going to write in the chat box, I'm going to talk a little bit about just a quick review of kind of like some foundational things for setting boundaries. So setting boundaries, again, has that self-awareness. Some benefits to setting boundaries allows you to communicate assertively. You also have the ability to prioritize your self-care with boundaries. You learn to say no. I think one of the things that I'd shared a while back with a contact of mine is that no is a complete sentence. And it can be a boundary. And when you can learn to say no, saying yes at the right time, gosh, that's so good. It will feel good to say yes. I used to a long time ago would say yes to everything. And it's because I was interested in a lot of things. And then I realized I was way too overextended. And that wasn't good for my mental health. That was not good for my MS at the time. And I had to learn to to set boundaries and say no, not to say yes to everything that was asked of me. So creating boundaries helps you to seek support, to learn how to share those boundaries with people close to you, and so that they can understand. It also allows you to adapt when necessary. It allows you to practice self-compassion for yourself, what you need for you. And I don't have anybody chiming in on this one. So what I'm going to ask you instead on this question, is there a boundary that you need to set? Is there something that you're struggling with, a boundary that you're struggling to set? So we have Kathy that said, I had to set a complicated boundary that was hard but necessary for my mental wellness. I'm very proud that you did that, and I'm sure that was very hard. Relationships in themselves are very complicated, and it sometimes can it can be challenging to set a boundary. But the good thing that can be of it is that it is better for you. So Linda has set a boundary on driving. She only drives during certain hours and not in the dark. And so by setting that boundary for that yourself, you probably have lessened anxiety. I know that driving has been something that you've been working on. And so by setting those boundaries and parameters, that kind of allows others to know when you're going to drive and when you're not going to drive. But for you, it probably gives you some sense of comfort because that's when you're comfortable. Another boundary is to say, I don't want to listen if you yell at me. And that is that's a very clear boundary. I'm not going to listen to you if you yell at me. What that's saying is that I'm not going to listen. And so that is an example of a boundary as well. If you're not new, or if it's new to setting boundaries and you're thinking about boundaries that you want to set, what I would recommend is to be easy on yourself, to kind of think about the things that you need. And sometimes it can be your resources. How is your energy? That might tell you a lot about your boundaries. Not your MS energy as much from fatigue standpoint, but your mental energy, your physical energy too, though. And MS does play into that. How is your mental energy? Are there people that when you realize that you're interacting with them, that your mental energy goes down? Or if you notice that you have too many physical tasks going on, does your anxiety go up? Paying attention to kind of what you need. And this is a really good one. Joe here said, sticking with a healthy diet with others is a hard boundary for me. That is a hard boundary for many people. And I think that that's a really good boundary to be able to communicate and maybe express, because it's something intuitively that you want to do, it sounds like, but also it's a challenge when you're around other people too. And so I explore you to, or I explore, I encourage you to talk with some of the people in your life and let them know that too, that it's hard. Because they can, maybe help, as healthy relationships do, support the things that you're working on. Rhonda says, I let my family know that afternoons my decision-making process is more difficult and I'm apt to forget or make bad choices. So it sounds like you let the people know that love you that kind of later in the day when you're tired, that it sounds like your emotional energy and your mental energy is lower, and so they can be on your team to help you with your boundaries as well, if that makes sense, and also kind of lets them know kind of the space that you're in, which is, I think, really important too. Let's see if anyone else. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. And then we have Melissa that said, I've gotten so much better at saying no to myself and not be such a perfectionist and not stress over having OCD. I think one of the hardest things is the boundaries that we have within ourselves that we're trying to do, right? And so it can be really challenging. But when we work on boundaries and when we work on what's important to us, I think the awareness of what boundaries we need is like the very first thing. And then knowing that setting boundaries with others, is hard, and setting boundaries with ourselves is hard too. Because relationships are complicated, life is complicated, etc. But I am so glad that you've gotten better at saying no to yourself as well, and allowing yourself to kind of stop, because that, as we know, sometimes things like OCD can kind of complicate and make things harder. So we're going to talk a little bit about conflict resolution now. So, and I'm not going to stay here super, super long, but we're going to stay here for a hot second. So conflict resolution it's important with healthy relationships, because relationships are going to have conflict. It's just, it's sort of like how I've said in the past, life is going to have stress in it. It's inevitable. Relationships are going to have conflict. But there are some things, some strategies, some tips that can help you compromise and find compromise and resolve conflicts. You can also find ways to mediate, and you can also find common sources of conflict. So identifying common sources of conflict are really important. Most of the conflicts or sources can be dialed down to miscommunication. And so this is a very common thing that can happen, where someone says something, it's just misinterpreted. I know that at home, I just have a husband and a son, so two boys in my life. And we can have, my husband and I can have miscommunication very easily over things with our son. And it's because I might be busy and focused in one area, and he's telling me something over here, but I'm focusing over here. I'm not active listening because I was focusing over here to start with. And then we've created, he'll tell me something and then I don't remember it. So really creating for us, it's been me being able to say, setting a boundary. Hey, I'm focusing over here, but I'm going to come back and we can talk about that in a little bit. And doing that has really helped too, because we have been able to absorb some of those opportunities of miscommunication. So another source of conflict is differing values and beliefs. This is something we see in the world. This is something that that can be easy, that you can see in your marriage even too, is that you both just feel differently about something. And so people, we come from different backgrounds and experiences, and kind of learning what the other person believes and needs and prioritizes, etc. It can be helpful because it definitely is a primary source of conflict. Unmet needs or expectations, and so this can definitely relate to boundaries as well. But when expectations aren't clarified or communicated, and then you feel like they're not met, then conflict arises. You might feel resentful or frustrated. Personality clashes can create sources of conflict. And so you may find that some people intuitively it feels better when you're around them. Some people intuitively you might feel like it's more stressful. And then also external stressors can cause conflict, such as like financial strain, health issues, organizational changes. I know it is very common. I allow myself to be a human with you guys. So when things are going on with my son, and if it's stressful, then my husband and I both kind of feel a little bit more stressed. And I have a good son; he's healthy and great. But as a parent, I've realized that, gosh, if we're both stressed about my son, then we tend to be more stressed in general together. And you can see that probably in your own life too, is that there's other things going on that you might have the ability to have a little bit more conflict at home sometimes too. And conflict is not it's not a bad thing. It can be done right. Conflict, I think, gives us an opportunity to work together. And so ways that you can have some value out of conflict or get some value is really looking at how to resolve it in a way that's going to be helpful. And so one of the ways is open communication. And this is through encouraging dialogue where all parties can express their feelings. They're actively listening, and you're also fully engaging. Staying calm and respectful, clarifying your expectations, seeking feedback, and focusing on solutions. I think it's also really important to note that you might find that there's trends in some of your relationships where conflict feels higher at certain times. I know with work, I can feel like if there's a lot going on with work, I feel that people's stress level goes up, and people are a little bit, like they're a little bit more stressed. Or if my family has a fun trip coming up, my husband and I are very different in how we travel and how we approach travel. And so I need to be early for everything. He needs to be just on time or barely late. And so we already know that's going to be us. And so we talk about resolution ahead of time because we know that that's one of the things that we don't do well is traveling at the beginning. It's always fun when you get there, though. So then also another thing is meditation and compromise. So or mediation, sorry, mediation. So if you're struggling with an important relationship in your life and you need some third-party help, mediation sometimes can be helpful, and this can be done through like a mediator or a counselor, etc. And that might allow, and therapy, you can do that in therapy as well, and that might allow you to come up with some creative solutions that you have a third party, a non-biased third party, etc. So in essence, conflict is really it's a natural part of human interaction. And so if you have any relationships that have no conflict at all, then that's kind of interesting, but there should be some level of conflict sometimes. And I think it's about how we resolve conflict, how we work through it, etc. And by doing that, by allowing yourself to be willing to make a boundary for yourself that I'm going to help resolve conflict in a healthy way, that is overall healthy for you, which in turn is healthy for your body too, because it minimizes stress. So all these things are interrelated in many ways. So we're going to go on to our next slide. Okay, so what is a pro tip? Because I'm calling you guys pros too, for conflict resolution. What is something that you have done in the past, or that you can recommend that you've done to help with conflict? So I think one of my pro tips with conflict resolution is laughter. Sometimes my husband and I can tend to find a middle ground with laughter, and that kind of helps. Not laughing at each other, just kind of at the silliness of some of our stuff sometimes. Another pro tip is giving space and setting space down and then coming back and talking about it later. That can be very helpful. Let's see. And then Dion says, take a break and agree to come back. It's a great strategy. Linda says, how do you get your partner to agree to go to counseling together? That one's kind of tough. I've worked with many people, and if you're on here and you've had a partner that you have had to work with and you were able to get them to go to counseling, what did you do? I think early on in my diagnosis, I asked my husband to go to counseling with me, and he was willing to go. It wasn't his thing, but he was willing to go, and I asked him, and it really was just to help with the diagnosis of MS, because I felt like that was such a new thing for our family. Linda says eye contact is a good pro tip. That is so true. And getting distractions out of the way. I think if the TV's on, turn the TV off. Being able to kind of really focus. Sometimes sitting outside can be helpful. Just being in nature can be helpful, but not to be overly distracted. David says talk. That is so true. And talk and listen. And then Dion says, do not try to fix the other person's focus. Focus on working and growing yourself. And that is so true. And that's a part of that codependent nature, is that we can't fix the other person, but we can work on ourselves. Carol says, leave the room when the conversation becomes aggressive. That's a really good pro tip. So recognizing unhealthy relationships. So there's different levels of unhealthy relationships. I think it's important to know, some relationships can be just subtly unhealthy, that they're unhealthy in a way that impacts our mental health or emotional wellness. Sometimes relationships can be physically abusive. And so, on a serious level, if you have a relationship that you are in that is unhealthy and it is unhealthy for you on a physical, mental, or emotional level, I encourage for you to seek help. I'm not going to I'm not going to ask you to chat in the question box about it, but I do want you to know that there are resources and support that can be helpful for you. Um, so identifying unhealthy relationships. I think some of the things that the physical unhealthy relationships are a little bit easier because you can see that you're getting hurt and you might have bruises and visible injuries that etc. Emotional abuse indicators. You may have decreased self-esteem. You might find yourself withdrawing from the things that you normally liked or engaged in. You may have fearful reactions. You may feel defensive or justification towards the person that is unhealthy that you're interacting with. Um, it's important if you are in an unhealthy relationship that is to a level of physical or mentally unhealthy for you, that you do seek help and someone safe to talk to about it. And I think that allows, again, a neutral third party to be able to talk through things. Relationships, you can have an unhealthy relationship that is not, that is mildly to moderately unhealthy. And you might work to establish boundaries in that relationship and be able to test and see if that person is respectful to your boundaries. And see if they're willing to grow. But sometimes we have to leave relationships, and that is a really complicated and hard process. And I do think that when it is a relationship that is relatively meaningful, it's important to work with a professional on that too. So let's move on to our next slide. Unhealthy relationships are tough, and if you're in one, I want you to know that you're not alone. And we'll move on to our next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional well-being in relationships. And so how you are in your relationship for yourself in terms of how your emotional wellness is going to reflect in your relationship too. So it's important to participate in self-care. And if you've been a part of this mental wellness chat, we have been talking about self-care backwards and forwards, inside and out. And anytime I can talk about it, I talk about it, because if we need small ways to take care of ourselves, sometimes big ways as well. But in order to be able to have a healthy relationship, you need to be well too. So there's a level of importance in your self-care. There also is for you to have a good sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, and also for yourself to have a foundation for success and what that means for you, which is important for motivation, resilience, personal growth, etc. Positive relationships, people that have higher self-esteem and self-confidence often form healthier relationships. And the reason being is that they're able to navigate boundaries, etc. Now, strategies to enhance some of this is positive self-talk, replacing negative or critical self-talk with positive things. What would you tell a friend or someone that you care about? We often will do that and tell people great things, but we can be hard on ourselves. Also, setting achievable goals, small goals that you can achieve. Surrounding yourself with positivity, engaging with supportive people, supportive environments, mentors, peers, people that lift you up, that you feel better being around. And then coping with the stresses that you have in any relationships. The stress can really impact relationships in all ways. setting boundaries, seeking support, etc. So in summary, really nurturing yourself and building a good sense of self-worth and managing stress in your relationships is really going to help you with feeling interconnected and having a better relationship or a better ability to participate in a relationship. We're going to move on to our next slide. So self-care, and I'm just going to mention real quick, I just think that this is kind of cool. So there, as I was doing some research, I'm always looking at self-care, different ways that I can talk about it. But there are all sorts of apps that can help you with self-care. And so if you are gonna be on the mental wellness chat next month, I have a homework assignment for you. I want you to find an app that might be able to help you with meditation or journaling or tracking your exercise or healthy eating, finding a hobby or relaxation stressful apps. I want you to look into technology a little bit, see if you can find something that you can share with us as a group for next month. So I wanted to thank MS Views and News for the mental health, this mental wellness chat. It's been so helpful for so many people for so long, and I am so thankful for the community that we've been building. And so what I will do is, I also want to thank Viatris for their sponsorship, and I want to, say thank you so very much. And I'm looking at the things. Scott, thank you so much for reaching out. And then Dion said it is Thanksgiving week, so I'll see you on Thanksgiving week. Listening is a very active awareness of the coming together of at least two lives. Listening, as far as I'm concerned, is certainly a prerequisite of love. One of the most essential ways of saying I love you is being a receptive listener. And if you're familiar with the mental wellness chat, you are familiar with this slide. It's a map of North Carolina. I don't say goodbye, I say see you later. And the truth is that I will see you next month. And I want to thank you for listening to me. I want you to thank you for listening to each other. And I wish you all well, and we'll see you next month.